rest of your public holiday. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Stern. Excellent share. I'm sure that it was enjoyed by everyone on a very topical and current issue. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure Rabbi Stern would be happy to answer them if you reach out to him. He's always looking for more people to learn with. For the second presentation of today, we're honored to have with us on the line live from California, Rabbi Moshe Bryski, who is a veteran shliach, a head shliach of the Kenneya Valley in California, and a veteran shliach of the Rebbe there, inspiring many Chabad houses in his area, and specifically with his Chabad house in Agora Hills. Rabbi Bryski, I've been honored to spend some time with him personally as well when I was a Bachar and younger, as well as many of his children, and he's been kind enough to join us here today to discuss with us the legacy of the Lubavitcher Rebbe as we prepare, as we come up towards Gimel Tammuz. It's a very timely issue as well. So, Rabbi Bryski, I know that we're maybe a minute or two early, but perhaps we can get underway and you can discuss with us this evening or this afternoon's topic.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I don't believe I've ever spoken on a day called the Queen's birthday, so I don't know if it's proper to begin by wishing the Queen a happy birthday and Arichas Yomim. I'm not sure what proper protocol are. So a happy birthday to the Queen. You know, historians like to look at pivotal moments in time. And there's volumes and volumes of details that could define each and every decade, thousands of volumes that detail a century. But there are those particular events that could be pointed at and shown that that moment changed the direction, whether it's a country or changed the direction of the entire world. You can call it a spark that ignited a flame that illuminated a world. History moves both in the negative and in the positive way by what we call these triggers. For us as Jews, we can look at some of these pivotal moments of our history. If I was to pick some examples, Lech Lecha, Hashem comes to Avram and he says, Lech Lecha, leave the place of your father, leave your birthplace, go to the land that I will show you. Nothing after that pivotal moment is the same. Everything changes from that one moment. So yes, there's a lot of volumes that we can say post Avraham, but it's that pivotal moment that changes everything. I'll give you a few more examples. Yosef becoming the viceroy over all of Egypt, eventually leading for that the rest of his family will eventually move to Mitzrayim. It will set the stage for the Golus of Mitzrayim. It will set the stage for Yetzias Mitzrayim. It will set the stage for Har Sinai. But that pivotal moment was when Yosef becomes the viceroy. The burning bush is another such moment. It's a pivotal moment in time. Obviously, Har Sinai, Aseres Hadibris, entering the promised land, building of the Beis Hamikdash. These are pivotal moments that everything that happens thereafter is affected because of that moment, that particular day, or even that particular hour. Even in the negative side, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is a pivotal moment in Jewish history, because one can ask the question, then, would there be a Jewish tomorrow? What did the Churban mean? Did it mean that the covenant between God and the Jewish people came to an end? Is the Jewish experiment of a chosen people a failed experiment and it's over? Would there be a Jewish future without a Beis Hamikdash? The Anshe Knesset Hagdola faced that pivotal moment in time. I say this as an introduction because I will say that with confidence, that the 28th day of the month of Sivan, corresponding to June 22nd, 1941, less than 2 weeks from now, the day of the arrival of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to the United States, 79 years ago, is one of those pivotal moments in Jewish history, not just in regards to the 20th and 21st century, but for all of Jewish history. Let's go back up 1 year before that day, 1 year prior, when the Frierdiker Rebbe first came to the shores of the United States in 1940. He resided in a Manhattan hotel called the Greystone Hotel. Now, between the torture and the persecution that he suffered at the hands of the Russians and what the Nazis Yimach Shimon put him and his family through, physically, he was a broken man. He was confined to a wheelchair. But spiritually, he was a powerful force of energy and determination. From the moment of his arrival, he began organizing yeshivas and shuls and mikvahs and publishing houses, building a dynamic infrastructure for Torah, Judaism, and the free world. Now, many of the leaders of the American Jewish establishment of that time came to meet him. One after another, they came to the Greystone Hotel, and they each had the same message. Rebbe, this is America. This is not Europe. You're here. You're safe. You have your small group of followers. Find yourself a nice home. Get yourself a little shtibel. Get some good medical attention and write your memoirs. That's what you do here in America. You write your memoirs. You relax. You convalesce. Things are different here in America than in the old country. What you're trying to do will not fly in this culture and in this environment. American Jews don't want this, so just let it go and relax. But the Rebbe put everyone on notice. The famous word, America is nit anders, America is no different. It's going to happen here. And the torch of Yiddishkeit, of Jewish learning and living, was not extinguished by the Bolsheviks. It was not extinguished by the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, and it most certainly will not be extinguished by an American culture of unawareness and assimilation. Make no mistake about it, we will carry the torch forward. The Frierdiker Rebbe defied the conventional wisdom. And of course, those yeshivas and those Torah centers and those mikvahs and those publishing houses did indeed open. When the Rebbe of our generation assumed the leadership in 1950, that torch began to shine with even greater radiance and intensity. In the early years, the Rebbe often would share a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement who lived in the 1700s. And this was the story that the Rebbe told. It was a cold, it was a rainy night. And the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov were sitting in the study hall. They were engrossed in their lofty mystical studies, when suddenly the door burst wide open and in came running this simple peasant wagon driver. The man was obviously very upset and in a deep state of panic. What was wrong? Because of the rain, the roads were muddy, and his horse got stuck in the mud. The wagon wheels were stuck in the mud, and the wheels of his wagon were stuck, and he was on his last legs, the horse. He couldn't pull it out. He couldn't stop. And he needs help to push the wagon out of the mud so that the horse will survive and he'll be able to get his merchandise home and his horse will live. And so he's crying to these Hasidim when he sees the only light on where there are people, where there are human beings, and he sees people that can possibly help him. So he comes in the middle of the mimer, the Hasidic discourse that the Baal Shem Tov is given, and he cries out, I need help, I need help. The mud, the wagon, the horses. He needs help. The Hasidim sitting close to the door respond to him, say, look, we would love to help you, but Moshish, we can't. The desperate man, the wagon driver, yelled back, Moshish, Dan Yechoshish. Loosely translated, you can. The question is, do you want to? Don't tell me you can't. You can, of course you can. You can get up from your chairs. You can come outside. You can each give a little push. The wagon will come out of the mud. The horse will be able to go on from there. So don't tell me you can't. Say you don't want to. The Baal Shem Tov stopped his talk. And he told his students that the message that they just heard from the peasant was far more important and far more profound than any message they can get from his talk. And they should remember those words. Moshish dan yechoshish. Can? One always can. The question is, do you want to? The Rebbe would tell this story on countless occasions, especially during the 1950s, the first years of his leadership of Chabad Lubavitcher. At that time, the unspeakable pain of the Holocaust was all too fresh in the hearts and the minds of world Jewry. The after effects of the physical nightmare led to spiritual disillusionment, causing so many of our people to drift away from their sacred heritage. At every opportunity, during every gathering, the Rebbe would exhort his followers, we must reignite the sparks within the souls of our brethren throughout the world. We must reach out with love, with acceptance. We must inspire them with goodness and with the sanctity of Torah. We must strengthen the faith. We must build schools and shuls and Chabad centers in every corner, crevice of the globe, wherever Jews may find themselves. At first, the Rebbe's cries were met with skepticism, if not outright rejection. Who are we and how are we to even attempt such ambitious and unrealistic endeavors? If we'll be able to maintain our own family's sense of Jewish identity and commitment, that would be a miraculous achievement in itself. But to go out there into the dark and apathetic world and seek to influence and inspire others, it's impossible. We can't. We just simply can't. And the Rebbe wouldn't hear of it. In a voice reverberating with passion and with urgency, he would quote the frustrated wagon driver in the Baal Shem Tov story. You can. The only question is, do you want to? The Rebbe, however, was also the most persistent of men. And so in the days and in the months and the years to follow, he would take his Hasidim by the hand, so to speak. He would encourage them. He would assure them, Moshe da, you can, and therefore you must. The Rebbe called upon his Hasidim to share his vision for a brighter future for all, to seize the moment. He looked us straight in the eye and he said, you can make a difference. You can impact a community. You can change a world. Yes, you, teenagers and young couples in your 20s and your 30s, stand tall. Strengthen yourself. Ufaratsta, spread out. Eretz Yisrael, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia, North America, South America, East Coast and West Coast, go. Emboldened by this inspiration, first tens, and then hundreds, and then thousands of shluchim emissaries went forth upon every continent. Chabad evolved into a vital worldwide network of schools, of Chabad houses, of outreach centers spanning the globe. Indeed, the Rebbe's bold vision, his boundless love, and his relentless leadership rekindled the spirit of this post-Holocaust generation. Moshe dana choshesh, can you can? The only question was, did you want to? Back in 1972, as the Rebbe was approaching his 70th birthday, Shnas HaShivim, there were some well-meaning disciples and elder Hasidim who suggested to the Rebbe that now that he was getting on in years, perhaps it was time to slow down a bit. Stop putting in the long hours, investing so much of your health and well-being into all this growth and expansion. There's something in America called semi-retirement. You still work, you're still the Rebbe, but you slow down a little bit. They should have known better. As a matter of fact, leading up to the Rebbe's 70th birthday, the Rebbe said that there's in America this tradition called a birthday gift, that one gives a gift to the birthday boy. And people have been asking him what he would like for his birthday. So he's going to state publicly what he would like for his birthday. It wasn't a new car and it wasn't a new house. The Rebbe asked for the establishment of 70 new Chabad institutions. At that time, the number 70 in 1972, to think in that short period of time that they can open 70 new maesters was again, unthinkable. But who wouldn't want to give the Lubavitcher Rebbe a gift for his birthday, especially a gift that he was asking for? And so on that eve of that historic birthday, at the Yud Aleph Nissen Farbrengen, at Lubavitch headquarters, the Rebbe was handed a list of over 70 new centers that were going to be opened during the course of that year. The Rebbe was very pleased with his birthday present. At that gathering, there was a group of donors from California, and they approached the Rebbe to present him with a key to one of those 70 new Chabad houses. And the Rebbe said to that group, he said, this is going to become a pattern. This is going to catch on. This is just the start. Chabad houses are going to become like a chain store. You know, here in America, we have chain stores like Macy's, and in those days it was Crevettes and A&S, where you have the same type of store in every single city in the country. They carry the same garments, they have the same sales, the same look of the store. So the Rebbe was saying that Chabad houses were soon going to be like chain stores, just like you have a Macy's in every city, in every community. There's going to be a Chabad house. And they all smiled. Yeah, it was cute. It was wishful thinking. Chain stores, yeah, Chabad. We got to 70. That was a big number. In the decades to follow, the Rebbe would continue to launch initiative after initiative, campaign after campaign, project after project, with the consistent underlying message that we must carry the torch forward. We must educate more children. We must reach out to more families. We must touch more lives, wherever they may be and whoever they may be. That prediction that the Rebbe made on his 70th birthday would indeed be proven correct. Chain stores. Macy's can only dream of such coverage. I checked earlier today on Google how many Macy's there are in the entire world. The number is 839, and that was before the pandemic, which caused the closure of many of those. There are close to 4,000 Chabad centers today, manned by over 5,000 shluchim and shluchos. Today, there is hardly a city, a town, or a village where there are Jews that live on the face of this earth, where Chabad does not have a presence. The Rebbe's inspiration, the Rebbe's mandate, continues to echo all across the global expanse. As Rabbi Telushkin concludes in his recently published book called Rebbe, we are bearing witness, he writes, to the greatest renaissance of Jewish life in history, not in a century, but in our entire history. Pivotal moment of history. So how did he do it? How was this accomplished? Who am I to say? There are so many books that have been written trying to analyze the Rebbe's strategy, the Rebbe's game plan, the Rebbe's philosophy. It's being studied by scholars to try to understand how did one human being change the Jewish world, more so than at any time in our history. I am neither a scholar or a historian nor a philosopher, but I would like to focus on one aspect of the Rebbe's approach, and perhaps be able to express myself better with a series of stories to point out this particular approach of the Rebbe. The story is told about one of the great shluchim of the previous generation from your part of the world, Rabbi Chaim HaKayin Gutnik Olav Shalom. As you know, he was a very prominent and prestigious rabbi in Australia. He was president of the Australian Defense of the Rabbinical Council of Victoria. He was chaplain of the Australian Defense Force. He was a very dynamic and eloquent speaker. When he spoke, he would paint in this picture of vivid, breathtaking color, and he would enrapture his audience. And so the story goes that he was once asked by the Rebbe to offer a lecture on the topic of mikveh, of taras hamishpacha for women in Melbourne. Now, Rabbi Gutnik, for his part, was extremely apprehensive about this event because back then, mikveh was not something that we spoke about publicly. It was private classes. Someone would study about privately, but there wasn't a campaign of taras hamishpacha. And so lectures weren't offered in a public-like setting. And here the Rebbe was asking him to publicly do a lecture about mikveh. He didn't think people would come out for it or that they would have any interest on a very difficult and touchy subject. But the Rebbe wanted it, and the Rebbe was pushing it very strongly, so obviously he was going to do it. And the Rebbe said, and after the lecture, I'd like to have a report from you how it went. Well, of course, if the Rebbe asks you to do something, you're going to want to do it right, so you're going to get a hall, we can fit many people, and you'll publicize it. The event was held, and Rabbi Gutnik comes in for this lecture, again, a lecture asked for by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he has what we in the industry would call a rabbi's worst nightmare. Let me explain briefly what a rabbi's worst nightmare is. Many people think that a rabbi's worst nightmare is if we publicize an event and we plan for an event and we set up for an event and no one shows up. That's not a good evening, but it's not our worst nightmare, you see, because no one knows that no one showed up. So as long as we don't have the humiliation on top of it, we can survive. The worst nightmare is when one person shows up, because now you have to go on with the event and everyone's going to know that only one person showed up because one person showed up. There's one woman in the room and he has to get up and deliver a lecture on the subject of mikveh. The next day he submits his report to the Rebbe, and it was filled with great distress and disappointment. It was a disaster, Rebbe, an utter failure. I apologize. I let you down. It was the worst speaking engagement of my career. I had this room set for hundreds of people, and in the end, only one woman, one single solitary woman showed up for this monumental address on Taras HaMishpacha. I gave the speech that you asked, but I let you down. Only one woman showed up. And the Rebbe immediately responded with one simple line. The line was, Moshe Rabbeinu only had one mother. That's it. Moshe Rabbeinu had one mother. You see, it says in the Talmud, Lefichach Nivra Adam Yechidi, the reason that Hashem created the human being, Adam and Eve, singularly, individually, unlike other living things that were created in bunches, entire species at a time, was to teach us that one person equals the world. Every individual is an Olam Malay, an entire world unto himself or herself. And Kol HaMekayem Nefesh Achas Mi Yisrael, whoever sustains the soul of one single Jew, Ki'ilu Kiyam Olam Malay, is reckoned as having saved an entire world. Every single Yiddish neshama is an entire world. Moshe Rabbeinu had one mother. Yocheved was one woman who was responsible for shaping the direction and the destiny of humanity for all time to come. You apologizing that there was only one woman? One woman can change the entire world. That one woman who showed up for Rabbi Gutnick's lecture, where is she today? I don't know. Is it possible that because of that one inspiring, individualized talk she heard that night about mikveh, that she's now the matriarch of generations of Yidden who are living al Taras HaKodesh? I don't know. Perhaps one of her granddaughters serves as a shlucha somewhere in the world where she's affecting thousands of lives. Who knows? What we do know is that to the Rebbe, one neshama equals the entire world. Don't apologize to me for inspiring one woman. Ayasha Koyach for inspiring one woman that can change an entire world. We are taught that if one Jew would have been missing at Har Sinai, the entire Torah could not have been given. And if one Jew, be it in Milwaukee or Kentucky or Japan or in Melbourne, is missing from the table of Yiddishkeit, then there is something missing from within all of us. Those involved in the Rebbe's work always keep this perspective because this is the essence of it. As Isaiah prophesies concerning the era of Mashiach, and the Rebbe quoted this pasuk over and over, and this was his modus operandi. This was the essence of the Rebbe's message to us, the atem, to look to echad, echad, to gather the Jewish people one by one, one by one. For the Rebbe, this was not some lofty, poetic idea or a handy catchphrase. It was and is a very real philosophy that has very practical implications and applications. This is our mantra. This was the Rebbe's mission statement. One Jew at a time. One mitzvah at a time. A Baal Tshuva from a distant city once came to the Rebbe. And it's on videotape by dollars. He thanks the Rebbe and he says these words. He thanks him for having sent a shliach to bring Yiddishkeit and assistance to this little Jew in a tiny, insignificant community. The Rebbe said to him, there is no such thing as a little Jew, and there is no such thing as an insignificant community. To the Rebbe, every part of the world, bar none, is of monumental significance, and every Jew looms huge in God's master plan of creation. You're all, I'm sure, familiar with the story of an elderly woman that once waited online for dollars, and the lines for dollars at times could go on for hours and hours and stretch at times for blocks and blocks. And this woman waits on the line. She's there for about 2 hours, and she gets to her time in front of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe gives her $1, and she cries out, Rebbe, you, my dear Rebbe, I've been waiting on line for 2 hours to see you. And my feet hurt, they ache. 2 hours is a long time for an elderly woman. But you, Rebbe, you were here already for hours before that. And you have hours to go after. How do you do it? How do you stand on your feet hour after hour after hour, week after week after week, year after year after year? How do you do it? So the Rebbe said, when you count diamonds, you never get tired. If you're looking at diamonds, you could never get tired of counting diamonds. I'm counting diamonds. When the Rebbe looked at a person, he saw beyond the superficial appearance. He saw beyond the imperfections. He saw the potential within. He saw the diamond within the neshama. And he deputized all of his Hasidim and followers to be his surrogate mavinim, the experts on seeing the diamond within the Yiddish neshama. That when we look at a Jew, we won't only see him or her for who he or she is today, but for who they can be tomorrow. And when we look at the environment around us, we wouldn't see it for what it is today, but for what we can transform it into tomorrow. I remember the first Rosh Hashanah I spent out in my part of the world called the Caneo Valley some 37 years ago. It was my first year Rosh Hashanah here. And after services on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, I explained to the congregation that there is a mitzvah of tashlich, and that we go to a body of water and we symbolically cast away our sins. And being that the name of the city was Westlake Village, certainly there's a lake in Westlake Village. So I'd like to invite whoever would like to join me for a walk to the lake so that we can fulfill the mitzvah of tashlich. A few people took me up on it, and they said they would stay longer and they would go. We're making our way to the lake, to Westlake, and someone points out to me that there's a shortcut, that if we go through this parking lot of a condominium complex, we can arrive at the lake a few minutes sooner. Now, I was new to the community. He was a resident here for years, so he must know. I'll follow you. Take me through this shortcut that goes through this parking lot of this condominium section. Okay, we're making our way through the parking lot. And as we're walking, I see an elderly woman, and she's walking with a walker. And as we get closer, she looks up and she spots us, and she sees us, the small group of Jews, and she starts crying out, Good Yontif, Good Yontif, Good Yontif. And I can see there's tears in her eyes. She's crying it over, Good Yontif. So I wish her back a Good Yontif and a Lashana Tova, and then she proceeds to explain why she was crying. She had had surgery on her legs a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah. And this was the first Rosh Hashanah in her life that she wasn't in shul. And she tells me she's been crying all day that she couldn't be in shul for Rosh Hashanah. In fact, her stroll at that time with the walker in the parking lot was the first time since the surgery that she got out of bed and she took a few steps outside. And who does she bump into? A walking shul. So I wish her refuah shalema, and I told her, Mirza Hashem, next year she should be well enough to come to shul. And after giving all my brachas, we continued on our way to Tashlach. As I'm standing there at the lake during Tashlach, suddenly this heaviness comes over me. I realized what had happened, and I realized how miserably I failed. This is what I vision as I'm standing at the lake 37 years ago. What had happened was a woman was lying in her bed in Westlake Village, California, and she's crying out to the Rebbe Shalom. Rebbe Shalom, I didn't hear the shofar today. And this is the first time in my life that I wasn't in shul on Rosh Hashanah, and I feel terrible. The Eibishter, as busy as he is on Rosh Hashanah, hearing the tefillas from every single part of the world, listens to the tefillas of this elderly woman. And he gives her the strength for the first time in weeks to get out of bed. And he whispers into her neshama, take your walker, go out. Just take a few steps, and I will arrange for a shliach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to walk by at that precise moment to go to Tashlach. And even if he starts going a different way, I'll make sure some nudnik from this congregation convinces him that there's a shortcut to take through this parking lot, which, by the way, was not a shortcut at all. And certainly the Eibishter felt that a shliach of the Rebbe would be carrying a shofar with him on Rosh Hashanah wherever he goes, just in case he bumps into a Jew that did not hear shofar that day. Everything was so perfectly arranged and orchestrated by the Rebbe Shalom, except one basic ingredient was missing. The rookie shliach forgot to take the shofar with him. I felt terrible. Here was this woman who had davened from the depths of her soul, and the Eibishter answered her prayers, and I dropped the ball. This is all happening to me as I'm standing in front of the water, in front of Tashlach, imagining all of this taking place. On the way home from Tashlach, I went the same shortcut way to make maybe perhaps I'll bump into her again so that I can fix my mistake. I had failed this woman, I had failed the Eibishter, I failed the Rebbe, and I needed to fix it. She was nowhere to be found. I couldn't sleep that night. So on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, instead of giving the sermon that I had prepared, I recounted this episode to those that came to shul that day. And I told them, this is what happened, this is what I believe took place, and I need to fix it. Do I have any volunteers that are willing to go with me and literally go door to door in this condominium section to see if we can find this woman? And this time I'll have a shofar with me. I can blow shofar with her. I had a few, very few volunteers. The rest of them were wondering what kind of rabbi did they send here? Who is this Meshugana? But I think we had 3 or 4 volunteers that came with me. We go back to the spot in the parking lot where I met her, look around, obviously there's no one there. So we start knocking on doors. There's a few hundred doors to knock on. Do you know a woman that walks with a walker? And no one knows because she never walked with a walker before that day. So no one knew the woman that walked with a walker. When you say, do you know an elderly woman? 70% of the people that lived there were elderly. So I wasn't getting anywhere. Look for a mezuzah, there were a lot of mezuzahs. So we literally start going door to door to door. I wasn't going to give up. I was going to find this woman. I was determined to fix this. I'm going to blow shofar for this lady if it takes me all day. Finally, as we say, jackpot. I knock on the door. A man answers the door, an elderly man. And I said, excuse me, I have this odd question. Does your wife, does she have a walker because she had surgery a few weeks ago? And he says, yes. Ah, wow, yes. I said, well, I came to blow shofar for her. And I explained, I met her yesterday. It's a long story. I messed up. The Eibishter, the Rebbe, the shofar, the parking lot, the shortcut. I'm telling him as quickly as I can, and I'm here to blow shofar for your wife. And he responds by slamming the door in my face. I kid you not, the door just closed real hard with a real bang. What did I say wrong? So I knock again. And I say, it's just going to take a minute. And he says, I don't want anything. I said, I'm not selling. You don't have to buy. I'm not here to sell you anything. I just need to blow shofar for your wife. Go away from my door. If you don't go away from the door, I'm going to call the police on you. Wow. Now I felt as if my teshuvah was not accepted. I messed up, and it's not going to be repaired so easily. I try anything I can, but he was absolutely stubborn. He was not opening the door. At least I tried. At least I tried. Maybe I can deal with the guilt knowing that I tried. I begin slowly walking away from this condominium. And I hear the woman calling out from the back patio. The back patio had these slats of wood where there was these slight openings that the person inside the patio can actually see a person walking outside the patio. So she's able to see me. And she says, is that you, Rabbi? Is that you? I say, yeah, it's me. You're so good. I'm so happy you saw me, because I tell her quickly the whole story. I came to blow shofar for you. The Eibishter heard you. The Eibishter cares about you. I messed up. I didn't have the shofar yesterday, but I'm here. But the guy won't let me through the door. So she says, just ignore him. That's my husband. I said, how can I ignore him? He's guarding the door. She said, I'll tell him to let you in. So I go back to the door. The man opens the door, and as soon as I come in, he runs away down the hall, goes into his bedroom. So the first thing I ask the lady is what's with him? So she explains that he's very angry at religious Jews. Why? Because our son became Orthodox. Our son used to eat by our house once a week. Our son won't eat by our house anymore. So he's very upset, and he's angry. So he let it out on you. So I explained again that I came, that the Eibishter heard our prayers. I came to blow shofar. I explained what the Rebbe and Shluchim, and the Rebbe wants every Jew to hear the shofar. So I want to blow the shofar for you, but I want to ask you this question. Was your husband in shul today? She said no, because I didn't go, he didn't go. Did your husband go to shul yesterday? No. So I said, so he didn't hear shofar the whole Rosh Hashanah either? She said no. So I said, so if I'm going to already blow shofar for you, he might as well come out of the room and hear the shofar. So she says, hey, you be my guest. Do you want to try? Gesundheit. So now I knock on his bedroom door. I was a little bit crazy in the early days. You're a little more courageous when you're younger. And I explained, I said, look, I'm about to blow shofar for your wife. And I know you're angry because your son won't eat here. I'll make a deal with you. You come out and you hear shofar, and tomorrow I'll call your son. No, your son can't eat non-kosher, but there are things we can do. He can have his own toaster oven here. He can have his own microwave over here. He can bring in takeout food. But kabedes avicha ve'esimecha remains. Respect for his parents should remain. And I will speak to him and explain to him how he can go about still coming on his weekly night once a week for dinner with his parents, and do it will be absolutely kosher as well. But for now, come out and hear shofar. Surprisingly, he says, okay. He comes out onto the back patio. I'm about to blow shofar now for the both of them. And he says, stop, wait. He points to his head and he says, I can't hear shofar without a yarmulke on. And he runs back to his room to get a yarmulke. So the man that was going to call the police on me just a few minutes earlier now needs a yarmulke on his head. Very nice. I'm about to blow shofar again. And he says, stop, wait. My brother didn't hear shofar either today. So if you don't mind waiting, I'd like to call him up and ask him to come over so he too can hear shofar. So I say, no, you can't exactly use the phone on Yontif. So he says, no. I said, I'll call him. I didn't ask you to call him. I said, I will. I know I'm about to hear it from him. I say, well, I can't have you exactly do that either. So he says, okay, fine. I won't call him. I'll just go drive and get him. I say, that's also not such a good idea. Why don't you give me his address? If it's not too far from here, after I finish blowing shofar here, I'll go over to his house and I'll blow shofar for him there too. So he says, I have a better idea. He doesn't live too far from here. Why don't the two of us walk together to my brother's house? We'll bring their whole family here and we'll hear the shofar all together, both families. And that's what we did. My new friend now walked together with me to his brother's house. We brought the entire family over and we blew shofar together. And that tradition of stopping in this house on the way to Tashlach continued for over a decade thereafter, to the point that it became a whole community meeting point, that anyone in that condominium section would come to this particular house on the first day of Rosh Hashanah to hear shofar on the way to Tashlach. We don't give up on any neshama, every neshama, and maybe they appear angry, maybe they have excuses, but it's just some dust that's covering up their neshama that we need to blow away. The Rebbe taught us that deep within every single yid is a desire to do the mitzvah. Being out there on the front lines exposes us to these miracles, the miracles of the Jewish soul, the miracle of the neshama, day in and day out. We get to observe them firsthand. Oftentimes we get to play a role in them to the point where you can't help but be in awe of the great zechus we have of being the vehicles for such incredible, wondrous events, powerful strokes of divine providence engineered by the brachas and the guidance of the Rebbe. The shliach in Utah is a friend of mine, Rabbi Benny Zippel. A few hundred miles from where Rabbi Zippel lives, there are institutions for troubled teens. They used to call them reform schools, now they're called rehabilitation centers. So if a teen gets in trouble with the law, you don't want to put them in prison with hardened criminals because that's not a good place for them. But at the same time, they broke the law. So there's an option of them going to a rehabilitation center. And if they go to the rehabilitation center and they serve their time there, they can come out rehabilitated, they can learn from their mistakes, and they can come back to being members of society, functioning members of society. So Rabbi Zippel, being the only rabbi in Utah, the only shliach in Utah, travels hundreds of miles on his weekends, on his Sunday time off, and he visits with these rehabilitation centers and he speaks to the teenagers so that there's some connection to Yiddishkeit for the Jewish teens that are unfortunately stuck in these centers. So one day, it was a Friday, he gets a call from a woman. And the woman tells him that her daughter was in one of these institutions and she ran away. She escaped. There's no prison bars on the door, but if you leave and you get picked up by the police, you're not going back to the rehab center. You're going to do some hard time in prison. And the police caught her and they picked her up and she's sitting in a prison cell right now. And Rabbi, she once told me that there's a Chabad rabbi that comes to visit. I imagine, I looked up Utah, there's only one Chabad house. I imagine it's you. I'm begging you, please do what you can to save my daughter's life. See if you can convince the rehabilitation center to give her another chance, to let her back in. So Rabbi Zippel says, I happen to know the director of that center very well. And today is Friday, so I will tell you what, on Sunday, I'll make a trip over there. I will meet with them. I will speak to them. I'll pick up your daughter from prison. I will bring her back to the rehabilitation center. I'll take care of all of this for you. But it's going to cost you. It's going to cost. So she says, of course, whatever the fee is, you name your price. So Rabbi Zippel says, no, I'm not talking about money. When I say it's going to cost you, I'm not telling you dollars. It's going to cost you a mitzvah. That's the price you're going to pay. I want you to do a mitzvah in honor of your daughter. What I want you to do is I want you to light the Shabbos candle every Friday night. You light the Shabbos candle every Friday night, and in that merit, Hashem, God Almighty, is going to help your daughter, and I'll fulfill my end of the deal, and I'll go work on the details to get her back in. Silence. Quiet. When a moment ago she thought it was money, of course, whatever you want. Now, mitzvah, she says, Rabbi, you know, money I'll give, but I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not religious. I don't feel comfortable doing things. I'm not sure that our Reform temple, I don't know that we do these things. I'm not sure. Let me think about it. He says, think about it. Your daughter is sitting in a prison cell. Think about it. Light the candle. Do the mitzvah. So she says, okay, fine. Send me the kit and the information brochure in the mail, and I'll light it. But please take care of my daughter. So Rabbi Zippel responds, listen, It's Friday. Why do I have to send you the kit in the mail? It's already Friday. Shabbos is coming soon, and I'll already be there on Sunday. But you don't have to wait for a kit in the mail. You can light the candle today. You can do the mitzvah today. I'll tell you exactly what time. And she starts panicking on the phone. No, I can't. I don't have the information. I don't know how to do it. I need the kit and the information brochure. So, now, Rabbi Zippel, just without knowing yet where this woman lives, but he just has this confidence that wherever she is, there must be a shliach nearby. So he says to this woman this challenge: what if I can have someone bring you the candle today and show you how to light it? Would you light it today? And she says, of course I would, but Rabbi, Utah is a long ways away from where I live. Where do you live? I live in a city called Calabasas, California. Now, Rabbi Zippel is already on Chabad.org, Find the Center, and he's typing in the city name. At that time, today there is a Chabad house in Calabasas. At that time, I was the closest city to Calabasas. On Chabad.org and Find the Center will show you the closest Chabad center. So my name pops up as just 5 miles away. So he puts the woman on hold and he calls me and he says, Moshe, can you do me a favor? I said, sure, Benny, what can I do for you? He says, I'm going to give you a phone number of a lady and you're going to call her up in a few minutes as soon as I hang up from her. And you're going to arrange to bring her a Shabbos candle today and show her how to light it. No problem. Of course, I'll do it. Okay. He gets back on the phone and he says, deal. Someone will take care of it for you today. She says, it's not going to happen today, but okay, it's a deal. He hangs up. I ring her phone. She picks up the phone. It's her cell number. And I say, hello, I'm the Candleman delivery boy. And she's freaking out. She can't believe this is happening. I just got off the phone with the rabbi in Salt Lake City. How do you guys do this so fast? I say, we have a network. We have a network. Just give me the address of your home and I'll be right over with a candle. She says, I can't understand. How is this happening? But you know what? Can we just do this next week? Because I'm not home right now. It's really not convenient for me to go back to my house. So I say, so where are you now? She says, I'm in a small city called Agoura Hills. I say, really? What street are you on in Agoura Hills? She says, I'm on Canwood Street. I say, okay, we're on Canwood Street. She says, I'm by the gas station on Canwood near Reyes Adobe. I say, ma'am, I want you to know that you are about 100 feet from my office. In fact, if I look out my window, I could probably see you right now. So this is what I want you to do. Finish putting the gas in your car. Put the cap back on top of it. Come out of the gas station by making a right turn. Literally drive 150 feet. I'll be the man standing in the street with a candle for you. And literally within minutes, she shows up and she's shaking and she's crying. And she says, Rabbi, I now believe this candle will have an effect on my daughter's life. I believe that God is watching over me. I believe God is watching over her. It was too perfect. It was too divine providence for her to be able to deny it. There she is standing in a gas station speaking to a rabbi in Salt Lake City, Utah, about helping and saving her daughter's life. And she's standing next to a Chabad house while she's having this conversation. The atem to look to, echad, the Rebbe told us, Isaiah tells us, go out and find them one by one by one. One mitzvah, one candle, one tefillin, one Shabbos, one by one. There was a prominent Belzer Chassid who lived in Eretz Yisrael, who was not very fond of Lubavitcher. And he was an outspoken critic of the Rebbe. And he was particularly critical of the fact that the Rebbe would encourage his Chassidim to interact with the quote-unquote Freie Yidden. He felt that by mingling with these elements, Lubavitchers were exposing themselves and their children to influences that compromised their own standards and caused damage to the frum community as a whole. Whenever this man had a forum, an opportunity, he would mock the Rebbe's mitzvahim, he would mock the outreach campaigns, he would even write articles in Yiddish newspapers ridiculing the Rebbe and the Chabad movement. As time went on, one of this man's own sons became very disillusioned with Yiddishkeit, and he began to rebel. And things went from bad to worse until this young man left home and abandoned the Torah way of life completely. There was no talking to him, no convincing him to come back. He cut off his payas, he shaved off his beard, and he embarked on a totally secular way of life. In fact, he became now completely anti-religious. His entire family was crushed, but no one more than his father. He would cry himself to sleep every single night, and he suffered untold agmas nefesh over the loss of his son. One day, this young man, now a successful businessman, was walking in the central bus station in Tel Aviv when he was approached by none other than a Lubavitcher chassid. And the Chabadnik asked him if he put on film that day. And the man was very quick to respond that he had not, and he had no interest in doing so. Now, from the tone of that response, that tells the chassid, this is a guy I have to get. If someone says, no, I don't have the time, and they make some excuse like that, it's one thing. But when someone is adamant, no, I won't put on tefillin, you know, that's the guy. You got to get that guy to put on tefillin. He knew there was something there. So he doesn't back off. He engages the guy further, trying to explain the significance of tefillin, but nothing was getting to him. So finally, he tried this approach. And he said, look, I know you don't want to put on tefillin. I understand that. But what if I asked you to do that as a personal favor from me? Just a personal favor. I'm not scoring too well today, and we kind of have a competition amongst our guys. I'd like to be able to come back and say I got a few. So it's just a personal favor. That intrigued the fellow. It touched the chord. He said, fine, I'll do it as a favor for you. And he rolls up his sleeve. He doesn't need any help putting on the tefillin. And by the time he put on the shel rosh, suddenly something hit him. And he just broke down crying. And this was the opening that Chabadnik needed. And he put his arms around him, and they spoke some more, and some more. And they agreed to continue their discussions later in Kfar Chabad. To make a long story short, the man became a Baal Tshuva. And for the first time in years, his father began to be able to live again. And he danced for joy that his son had come back home in more ways than one. Shortly thereafter, this elder Belzer chassid got on a plane to New York, and he asked for yichidus with the Rebbe, which was granted. And he told the Rebbe the story of what had happened with his son. And then with tears in his eyes and shaking, he begged the Rebbe for mechila, for forgiveness, for all the years of criticism and ridicule he had leveled against the Rebbe for his efforts to bring Yidden back to Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe said to him, there's no greater pain in the world than which a parent feels when his child veers away from the right path. At the same time, there's no greater joy in the world than which a parent experiences when his child comes back home. I want you to know that the distress that you felt when your son went away and when he abandoned Yiddishkeit is the very pain that I feel every single day over every single Yid out there that's lost to Torah and to Klal Yisrael. At the same time, the joy that you felt when your son came back is the very joy I feel when I learn of any Jew who starts coming back to Torah and to mitzvahs, who takes one step closer to Yiddishkeit. The atem to look to echad, one Jew at a time, one mitzvah at a time. One of the weekly interviews on the Gem Living Torah series was with Rabbi Aaron Cousin. And he spoke about the release time program known in New York as the Wednesday Hour. The public schools allow for religious training for 1 hour a week. So 770 gives Bachrim off that time of learning so that they can participate in this program, and they're assigned a particular public school to go to. And during that time period, obviously, there's no Seder, the time it takes to get to the public school, to speak to the kids for the hour, until you get back, the time for preparation. So Rabbi Cousin tells the Rebbe in his Yechidus, he went into Yechidus for his birthday, that he asked the Rebbe that being that his birthday fell on Wednesday, perhaps it would be better for him on that day to immerse in learning and not go on the Wednesday hour route. And the Rebbe disagreed. The Rebbe said, if you truly want to celebrate your birthday, that's the best way to celebrate it, to give up your time and to be with the kids. A friend of Rabbi Cousins wrote to the Rebbe about Wednesday hour as well. He was a serious learner. He wasn't the most social individual. And he didn't feel that he was really connecting to the kids. And besides, he was missing out on too many hours of learning. And it was having a negative effect on his whole week. So he asked the Rebbe permission to drop out so he can devote his time to learning. And this is what the Rebbe answered him. I want you to know that all the sages in the heavenly world, and even the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, are envious of you, that you have the opportunity to say Shema Yisrael and to make a bracha with a Jewish child, and they don't have that opportunity. It is a great and awesome merit, the very fact that you can do this with a single Jewish child. This is how the Rebbe saw each and every single Jewish child on the face of the earth. This is how the Rebbe saw each and every individual mitzvah. This is how he inspired us to go out there and inspire a world. The atem to look to echad, one person at a time, one child at a time, one mitzvah at a time. One of the most widely read books of the 20th century was The Diary of Anne Frank. It's been published in more than 60 different languages. It is the eloquent and heart-wrenching words of a 13-year-old Jewish girl written over the course of 2 years while she was in hiding with her family during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. The family was apprehended in 1944, and Anne Frank ultimately perished in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. In her diary, Anne Frank describes how she would look out from the attic through the only window that was not blocked out to prevent anyone from seeing movement in the annex in which they were hiding. And she writes that there was this tree, a chestnut tree, that she can see from that window. She writes that nearly every morning I go to the attic to blow the stuffy air out of my lungs. From my favorite spot on the floor, I look at the blue sky and the bare chestnut tree on whose branches little raindrops shine, appearing like silver, and at the seagulls and at other birds as they glide on the wind. As long as this exists, I may live to see it, the sunshine, the cloudless skies. While this lasts, I cannot be unhappy. The last time Anne Frank writes about the chestnut tree was in her entry of May 13th, 1944, shortly before her family was discovered. She writes, our chestnut tree is now in full bloom. It's covered with leaves and is even more beautiful than last year. That tree represented Anne Frank's longing for freedom. It gave her the will to live. It gave her the hope to carry on. It gave her the inspiration to share words that will be immortalized for all time as a stark portrayal of the contrast between the ultimate of cruelty, the ultimate of evil, and the ultimate of innocence and purity. Anne Frank's stately and majestic tree, as it turns out, was one of the oldest trees in all of Amsterdam. Several years ago, unfortunately, it was discovered that the tree was diseased and had to be cut down, lest it fall down and cause serious damage or injury. So what happened? A group of people took the sap of that tree and they germinated it, from which they created hundreds of saplings. And these saplings, consisting of the exact DNA of the old tree, were then given to schools and organizations all over the world to nurture and to grow. Anne Frank's life, like 6 million others, was tragically cut short. But her tree, that legacy of hope and freedom and human dignity, that lives on, because it's been transplanted within the hearts of millions, within the very consciousness of humanity. I tell you this story because if you think about it, This is what the legacy of the Rebbe was all about. Planting trees, creating orchards, bringing life, beauty, goodness to all of mankind. The Rebbe wouldn't allow our tree, the tree of Judaism, the tree of Yiddishkeit, the tree of the Jewish people, the tree of the 6 million to be destroyed, to disappear. No, he replanted them. Not one tree, but thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews touched by his inspiration, touched by his teachings, touched by his love, touched by his warmth, by his embrace. And today we see how the dream of this leader has indeed illuminated a world. The atem to look to echod, echod. He did it though, one person at a time, one child at a time, one mitzvah at a time. A number of years ago, I spoke at a JLI retreat in Virginia. And one of the other panel of speakers that were there was a wonderful speaker from Brooklyn, New York, named Miriam Swerdlove. And I attended one of her talks that was scheduled when I wasn't talking. That was a fantastic talk. And at one point during her talk, she challenged her audience to tell her what they thought was the most important Jewish book in the world. And she phrased it this way: if you had a teenager who was going off to college, leaving home for the first time, and you wanted to give them a Jewish book that would hold on to them, they would hold on to their Jewish heritage because of that book, what book would you give them? And she said there's no right or wrong answers here. It's just a challenge for the audience, for each one to say what book they would give to their child leaving home that they feel would be the most important book for them to have. And every hand had to go up. She called on everyone. Everyone had to give an answer. Of course, a Chumash was one of the more popular answers, a Siddur. The more Hasidic ones would say a Tanya. Everyone had some books. Those more into literature would say Herman Wouk's book, Elie Wiesel's book. Every answer. And finally, everyone finishes, and she says, I'll tell you my answer. And she pulls out this little booklet. And she says, this to me is the most important book to give your teenager. What was it? It was a book that simply listed all 4,000 Chabad centers located throughout the world. And at first everyone laughed, thought it was some type of gimmick. Where is she going with this? More important than any other Jewish book. And then she explained herself and she said, do you know what this book tells you? It tells you, and more importantly, it tells your child who's off to college that anywhere today that you go on this earth, anywhere today you as a Jew may travel, you are never alone. There is always a place near you that you can walk right into and be welcomed with open arms and feel right at home. In more than 3,700 years of Jewish history, there has never, ever been a phenomenon like this, where there is a center of Yiddishkeit that is there readily available for every Jew on the face of the earth. It was so compelling. It was so powerful to think. Pivotal moment in history. I'd like to conclude with one final story. Back in 1990, when communism finally fell apart and Hungary gained independence from the Soviet Union, people suddenly had freedoms the likes of which they hadn't seen since 1956 when Russia invaded Hungary. For the first time in decades, people were able to make their own choices regarding the schooling of their children. And so, like everywhere all over the former Soviet Union, Jewish schools began opening all over Hungary. One such school was opened in Budapest, and a team of American teachers and rabbis came out to spearhead the effort. They placed an ad in the newspaper hoping to start the school year. Perhaps they will be able to attract 50 students to kick off a school. On the first day of registration, 450 children and their parents show up. The crowd was 9 times greater what they expected. Amazing. Contingency plans are made immediately to accommodate the overflow registration. They divide the parents up into different groups of 10 to talk about the school year and to talk about the curriculum and what they want to accomplish. And during one of these breakaway discussion groups, the rabbi asks the question that was on his mind all this time. What is going on here? We expected 50. Why 450? Why is everyone wanting to send their children to a school, to a Jewish school? Why, after so many years of not having religious education, do you want to enroll your children here? Obviously, I'm excited about it, but I want to understand it better. So each parent was willing to talk. Each one had a different answer. One talked about their own memories going to cheder in their youth. Another spoke about anti-Semitism in the municipal schools. One spoke about roots from their bubby, and they remembered some of the things that their grandmother did. Everyone had a reason. There was one man that was sitting in the back, and he wasn't joining in the conversation. And finally, the rabbi turns to him and says, and why are you here? Is there any particular reason you want to send your child to this school? And the man says, yes, there's a reason, but it's difficult for me to talk about it. But I'll try. I was a young child of 7 years old when the Germans occupied Hungary in 1944. They knew that the war was almost over for them, but in their sick obsession to kill as many Jews as possible, they rounded up as many of us as they could to send us off to Auschwitz. All Hungarian Jews were terrified. One night, I'm lying in my bed. I was 7 years old. I hear my parents arguing frantically. They never argued like that. I came down to hear what they were saying, but the door to the living room was locked. So I looked in the keyhole to see what was going on. My father was very agitated. And he said to my mother, look, we don't have to worry. No one knows we're Jewish. We don't look Jewish. We never did anything Jewish. We have no Jewish friends. What evidence could there be of our Jewish identity? We'll get away with it. You don't have to worry. To which my mother said, but maybe there's a list. Maybe somehow there's a list. Maybe someone knows, and maybe someone will turn us in. To which my father said, listen, even if there's a list, and even if they come here, we'll just deny it. What would give them to think otherwise? There is nothing in this house, nothing that they could find that will point that we are Jewish. Nothing. And as my father said that word nothing for that last time, they both stopped mid-sentence. And they both started staring to one particular shelf of a bookcase. My mother walked over to the shelf and she took down a book. It was a siddur. It was a prayer book. It was the siddur that her mother had given her on the day of her wedding. It was the same siddur that her mother's mother had given her mother on the day of her wedding. My mother took the siddur from the shelf. She leafed through the pages, and I can see through this keyhole that she was crying and tears were running down her cheeks. She turns to my father. She's staring at my father as she's holding this precious siddur in her hand. My heart was pumping rapidly. She then looked at the burning fireplace. My father nodded his head, and my mother tossed the siddur into the fireplace. As the siddur was being consumed by the flames, my mother fell to the ground in anguish. I ran upstairs. I threw myself onto my bed. I cried like I never cried before. I cried and I cried for hours. No, we had no Jewish friends. No, we never acted Jewish. No, we never observed anything Jewish. And no, we never celebrated anything Jewish. And yet I knew in my heart that what I just witnessed was awful and was a terrible thing. I felt as if part of my soul was ripped out of me. as if my family's journey had suddenly come to an end. In all of my years since, I have not been able to shake the pain of what I saw that night. Every night I have nightmares of pages burning in a fireplace and the tears just come. And so you ask me, why do I wish to send my child to this school? I'll tell you why. On the first day of school, I'm going to proudly walk into this building holding my son's hand. I'm going to walk into his classroom with him. And then I'm going to hand him a siddur. And my tears from that night will finally stop flowing. My dear friends, we live in a period of time that we have the freedom, that we have the resources, that we have the manpower, that we have the koyach, that we have the mandate of the Meshaleach of the Rebbe, that we can hand every Jewish child on the face of this earth a siddur, that we can connect and inspire every single Jew alive today. So let's go out there. Let's hand each and every Jewish child a siddur. Let's hand our Jewish brethren a Torah, a mezuzah, a tefillin, a Shabbos candle, a matzah, a menorah. Let's lighten and brighten the world. Let's prepare the world for the coming of Mashiach. Let's answer the peasant's question. We can, and we want to, and we will. The attempt to look to echad, each single mitzvah bring thousands more in its wake. Each new day demonstrates how the Rebbe's vision of transforming the world, making it ripe for Geula, wasn't only brilliant and prophetic, but was practical, and it's achievable, and it's within reach, and it must be now. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Oh yeah, thank you very much, Rabbi Bryski, for that powerful message. On behalf of everyone, I'm sure we're all very inspired. So thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone, we hope to see you in person perhaps one day.
I'm looking forward to it.
To celebrate the Queen's birthday with us.
Again, Mazel Tov to her. And for those of you that see my son in the yeshiva there, give him my regards and give him some pizza. Send him some love. Take care, everyone. A good night.
Thank you very much. Shkoyach, Rabbi Bryski.
Bye-bye.